Happy New Year. It's 2024, and I would like to look back at the last year of 2023 and think of what are the top commanders that I've played with. What are my top five commanders for 2023? And this year had a lot of really cool sets, a lot of really cool legendary creatures. But the thing is, for me, I'm a big Brawl player on Arena as well. What used to be Historic Brawl is now regular Brawl alongside Paper Commander. And like I play Brawl daily. So I've had a lot of chance to play with a lot of these commanders. So even though there were 25 commander pre-cons that came out, 25 in the year of 2023, I'm going to focus on just the sets that came out in paper as well as arena because I want to approach this from both the Brawl and the commander standpoint because I've got a lot more experience playing Brawl than regular commander. So with that being said, there are several sets that came out. These are the sets that are included in that scope of coming out in paper and arena in 2023. So I'm going to pick legendary creatures from these sets. So we got Phyrexia OLV1. We've got March of the Machine. We've got March of the Machine Aftermath, which, even though it was a small set, had a bunch of legendary creatures. We have the Lord of the Rings set. We've got Wilds of Eldraine, and of course, last but not least, Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So those are the sets that are going to be included in my top five. I've picked from those. And like I said, it's going to be from a Brawl and a Commander standpoint because I play both, and Brawl is a daily thing for me. So with that being said, I kind of had to really look back and think of Commanders over the course of the year because there were Commanders that I played a lot as they came out and not played as much here in recent sets, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be in my top five because they were some of the most fun I've had playing Brawl or Commander. And that thought process really came because initially all the cards that I picked, all five, were from the same set because some of these sets were really heavily focused on legendaries. But I was able to come up with a really solid list of five. So let's get into it. And as I cover each commander, I'm going to kind of cover what I believe are three cards that really should be in the deck, depending on how you approach it. Of course, there's so many different ways to approach these builds, but I'm going to talk about how I built it and why. So without further ado, let's get into number five. And and it kind of says it in the name of this card alone. Just to reiterate, these are my top five commanders, as in the cards that I enjoyed most building around, brewing around, and playing with. Now, they're not the top five as in the five best commanders, because that's just not an achievable task. I don't think you can say that these were the five best legendary creatures that came out for Commander. That will always change. So let's just go ahead and get into number five. Thrun, Breaker of Silence, which is our 5 mana troll shaman. It's 3 a green and a green for a 5/5. It can't be countered. That on its own is already great. It has trample. It can't be the target of non-green spells your opponents control or abilities from non-green sources your opponents control. So basically, it's hexproof to anything that's not green. As long as it's your turn, it has indestructible. So the great way about Thrun, Breaker of Silence, to play it is it's a Voltron commander. You want to play Thrun, you want to build it up, make it big, and have it hit your opponents hard and fast. With the trample, that makes it really, really good. And what's so fun about this is because it's indestructible in your turn, you can swing with it without really having to fear much except for maybe a Settled Wreckage. That's the only card that you have to fear when attacking with this. Of course, there's other effects in the format that can take care of this, but in general, it's a very safe card to attack with because of the indestructible on your turn. So it's a very cool card and a lot of fun to build around, and I've had a lot of fun playing this. So what I would recommend with Thrun, if you're playing Thrun as your commander, yes, it's a Voltron, and yes, you want to focus a lot on building up your Thrun and protecting your Thrun, but I don't like going all in. So I still want to throw in some other creatures, which luckily green has a lot of really good creatures. So you can focus on some ramp, focus on some ramp creatures, some mana dorks, and as well as some strong green creatures to kind of back up as well as your Voltron creatures. So like your Shifting Ceratops, which is hexproof from blue. That's another creature that's great to equip with some stuff if your Thrun just can't get through. So some cards that I think are good inclusions for your Thrun deck. So here are three cards that I really like to include no matter what. So, first, Season of Growth. Let's talk about it. So, 1 and a green for an enchantment that when it enters the battlefield under your control, you scry 1. Or when a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you scry 1, and whenever you cast a spell that targets a creature you control, you draw a card. It's a really great card draw engine, because you're going to be targeting your creature quite a bit, because with Thrun, you want to make it bigger. You want to put enchantments on it, so you're going to be targeting your creature with auras. You're going to be targeted with like a Tyvar Stand here, which is an instant that says target creature you control get +X/+X and gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. That's another thing that will trigger your Season of Growth. What I like about Tyvar Stand here is because it gives your creature hexproof and indestructible. You're like, well, Thrun already has indestructible on your turn, and it can't be targeted by anything that's not green. Green doesn't have a lot of great removal. There's fight spells, there's other green creatures that are really big, but don't forget that Golgari has a lot of removal, especially if you play Brawl. Almost all value decks that are multicolored will run a Casualties of War that takes care of your Thrun. They run either they run a Putrefy or they run Key of the Archives, which can generate a Putrefy. There's a lot of good Golgari removal that can get rid of Thrun. Also, Thrun is not protected from board wipes. So that's where a Tyvar Stand can come in and protect your Thrun from that. Also, what I like about it is the +X/+X. Tyvar Stand can be a finisher. I've finished a lot of games playing Thrun and making it big with a Tyvar Stand. Then also a card that's just a great inclusion is after you've attacked with Thrun, you have mana open, throw a classification on it, and then next turn, if your opponent does not answer your Thrun, you can swing for lethal. Because of the trample, the +20/+20, that's instant commander lethal. So Thrun is a lot of fun. You can make it stupid big and just go full Timmy mode and smash your opponents. I love Thrun. All right, let's go into number 4. For number 4, I've got Jeru and Hazoret. Jeru and Hazoret is a red, and a white, so 5 mana for a legendary creature that's a 5/4. As long as they have 1 or fewer cards in hand, Jirina and hazoret has Vigilance and Haste. Whenever Jirina and hazoret attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may exile a legendary creature card from among them, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Until end of turn, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. I love free spells, and Jirina and hazoret is just a great value commander. So initially when I had this commander, I was trying to play it in a way where it just really went all in on to getting cards out of your hand. So whenever this came on the board, you had haste, you could attack, and then you would basically flip the machine, get a legendary, play it, and see where you're at. What I found is a more efficient and more fun build for Jirina and hazoret is to just get a mid-range, aggressive mid-range, so not aggro, not mid-range, kind of an aggressive mid-range value legendary deck. You just throw all the good legendary creatures in your deck, some really good backup spells to protect those, and you just create value. If Jirina and hazoret cannot attack on the first turn it's played, not a big deal. Now, there are a lot of cool creatures or enchantments in especially red that gives your stuff haste when it ends the battlefield. But even if you can't attack with it right away, you probably have so much value, potentially protection on the board, to where you can attack with it next turn and gain value from it. Your creatures, there's a lot of super powerful legendary creatures in red and white and colorless that you can flip off of Jirina and hazoret. So you can generate a lot of value with this card, and it's just a lot of fun. And I like it in these colors because typically when you think value and free spells, you're thinking blue and green. Jirina and hazoret just gives it a refreshing other color combination, in my opinion. So some cards that I would include in a Jirina and hazoret deck is obviously Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. It's just so great to hit off of Jirina and hazoret. Because it's a cast for free, you're still casting it. So you trigger the Ulamog's cast trigger, which is when you cast a spell, exile 2 target permanents, which is just really powerful. It has Indestructible, and it's a 10/10. And whenever it attacks, the defending player exiles the top 20 cards of their library. So you can really quickly mill an opponent out with Ulamog, which that's not going to be how you win with Boros Legends, but still having a 10/10 Indestructible that exile 2 permanents is fantastic to play for free. So I love Ulamog in Jirina and hazoret. Boromir, Warden of the Tower, is just overall a really good legendary creature that I feel needs to go in every white deck that can play it. That's why I put it here, because I just wanted to feature it in this video as a legendary that's not necessarily a commander, but should be in every white commander deck. Because what it does, it shuts nonsense like this down. Boromir will shut down your opponent's Jirina and hazoret. It will shut down their Etali. It will shut down their Cascade triggers. It will shut down their Explore. Boromir is fantastic because what it says is whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. Simple. It's a 3/3 vigilance. Even if your opponents don't do all that funky stuff, it's still a 3/3 vigilance that if you sacrifice Boromir, Warden of the Tower, creatures you control get indestructible until end of turn. The ring tempts you. I don't care about the ring tempting you, but it's cool that it gives your stuff indestructible. And then Urza's Ruinous Blast is just really solid in any legendary based deck, and you're going to be running nothing but legendary creatures. So with this, you can just wipe out all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. So exile all non-land permanents that aren't legendary as a 4 and a bite legendary sorcery. Um, really powerful. You're going to be able to get rid of a lot of things of your opponents, and worst thing you're going to lose might be some mana rocks. Really powerful card if you built this deck right. Let's go to number 3. Number 3 is a very recent one. Amalia Benavides Aguirre. It's a white and a black for legendary creature Vampire Scout. That's a 2/2. It has the ward ability to pay 3 life, so if you want to target Amalia Benavides Aguirre, you're going to have to pay 3 life to do so. And with Amalia, whenever you gain life, it explores. Then destroy all other creatures if its power is exactly 20. So for those of you that are not familiar with Explore anymore, basically what you do is whenever you gain life, it explores. You reveal the top card of your library. You either put it in your hand if it's a land, or you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Then you can choose to put the card back or put it into your graveyard. So if it's a non-land, you gain a counter, and you can leave it there or put it in your graveyard. So it becomes kind of like a surveil mechanic. Really, really cool. Probably my favorite life game payoff I've ever seen because it's so instant. You filter through your deck, which is really great, so you can start looking for combo pieces really easily, really quickly with this. So obviously those are great inclusions for a deck like this. Like you've got your Exsanguinate, your Sanguine Blood, your Veto to start just infinite comboing. Those are great cards. You would put those in any life game deck. So I didn't name those in my 3 cards to include, but you would put those in any life game deck. What I really like about Amalia is just the fresh approach it has to life gain. The one thing about Amalia is it doesn't have lifelink itself, so you're going to have to try to find ways to gain life, which luckily in these colors you can do a lot. So first inclusion that I would say, Sorin Vengeful Bloodlord, which I think every Orzhov life gain deck will have this because it gives all your creatures and planeswalkers lifelink, so that gives Amalia lifelink. So Amalia gets bigger, you swing with it, you gain even more life. It's good. Sorin can also deal damage, but even better, it can return creatures from your graveyard by minusing it. So if your Amalia dies, you don't have to let it go to the command zone, you can just bring it back with Sorin. Again, black and white has a lot of ways to bring stuff back, but Sorin is just a very efficient way to do it, and the lifelink is just great to have. I like Lisa in this deck as well. It's 2 white, and black for a legendary creature angel. It's a 4/5. It has flying and lifelink, so you're going to be able to trigger Amalia if you get to attack with it. Just a big body by itself. But what's really cool about it is whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you can return that card to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So let's say you blow up the board with Amalia, then all those creatures except for Lisa can come back into your hand, which allows you to rebuild a lot easier. Also, if just Amalia dies, it goes back to your hand, so you can play it without the commander text. It's only a 2-mana commander, so you'll be able to recast it very easily, but if you can avoid the commander text, it's always better. I really like Lisa for those reasons. Also, it's kind of a pet card of mine. It's just really, really cool. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exiled instead. Yeah, that's alright. I don't really care to exile creatures because I have other ways that I can affect their graveyard. So that's kind of more of a downside in my opinion, but hey, with all the upsides, I still think it's a good card to include in the Amalia deck. Then another card that is a really great inclusion is Command Dreadhorde. For 4, a black and a black, it's a sorcery. Choose any number of target creatures and or planewalkers cards in graveyards. It deals damage to you equal to the total converted mana cost. Put them onto the battlefield under your control. So with Command Dreadhorde, you're going to be in Orzhov colors. So first off, you're going to have a lot of removal. Things are going to go into graveyards. You're going to be able to destroy some stuff. That's cool. But also your own graveyard. You're going to be exploring with Amalia. So you can put non-land cards into the graveyard. So if you come across some creatures, some planeswalkers, you just throw those in the graveyard. You're gaining life because you're a life gain deck. So at one point you can just throw down a Commanded Dreadhorde, get a bunch of stuff out of graveyards, and become a huge threat and potentially finish the game quickly that way. So Commanded Dreadhorde is a really cool inclusion in the Amalia deck. Really fun card. There's a lot of different ways to build it. I've seen like versions where you have Lurus as a companion and you keep everything very low cost. That's cool too, but I'm like to go with a little bit more simple of a build, and I think these cards are great ways to get there. So let's go to number 2, and for number 2 I might get some grief because this is a commander that is very popular but also very infamous. I personally have had moments where I don't like playing against it, but I've started to appreciate it more to play against it because it's also a bit of a challenge. You probably know what's coming. It is the one and the only, the crazy dino, Etali, Primal Conqueror. For 5, a red and a red, it's an elder dinosaur that's a 7/7 with trample. When it ends the battlefield, each player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. You may cast any number of spells from among the non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. For 9 and a green Phyrexian, you can transform it and activate only as a sorcery. When it's transformed, it is Etali Primal Sickness, which is an 11/11 with trample and indestructible. When it deals combat damage to a player, they get that many poison counters. Which basically means is if it hits, and it hits for at least 10 damage, your opponent is gone. But let's focus on the front side because that is where most of the action happens. You play this in Brawl, you exile both yours and your opponent's cards until you get an online card and play it. If you play this in Commander, you get 4 cards off of it. So good. It is so powerful. It's unreal. Um, very, very hard to play against. But in reality, all it takes is to disrupt their ramp because typically the Etali decks are not big threats without Etali, or they have to ramp up until they can start playing the cards that they really wanted to get for free off of Etali. So you really got to make sure that you interrupt their ramp, and then it's not that terrible to play against. So that's why I didn't feel bad putting this in my top 5. I do love playing it. I love all the absolutely disgusting stuff you can do with this. Um, yeah, it's just a great card to play with. It's going to be very satisfying. It can also be really frustrating if you play this and you hit like 2 mana rocks. But then again, that helps you to ramp to other stuff. So it you can't really go wrong. Once you cast Etali, you're going to be in a good spot. I love this card. It's so much fun. It's very easy to build, honestly. So my inclusions are going to be more top end stuff because you just want to play a lot of ramp to get your Etali out. But some of the cards that I really like to include here, up to Beanstalk is a great inclusion. It's a 1 and a green for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, and whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, draw a card. So you want to be able to draw cards, maybe get to some threats, not just ramp, but you're going to be playing a lot of spells that are 5 mana or more. And even off of Etali, if it's for free, it's still a mana value 5 or greater. So even if you hit a card off of Etali that's 5 or more, you draw a card. If you have it in Brawl, you might be able to hit it twice. In Commander, you might even get 4 hits. 4 card draws after casting 4 spells for free. The value is insane. Not including up to Beanstalk in the Etali deck is a huge mistake in my opinion. It's a very easy inclusion. I like to throw in O'Hare Kozlem Deepest Growth. I'm sorry I butchered that pronunciation. O'Hare Kozlem. Because it's a 3, green and green, so it fits on curve. It's a god that's a 6/5 with trample. When it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library. You may put a creature card and or land card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom if in random order. When it dies, return to the battlefield tapped, transformed under its owner's control, which is basically a land that can then transform back to O'Hare Kozlem at some point. This is a great ramp piece because when it deals damage, obviously getting a creature for free is great. A 6/5 trample is great. Like, you can't really go wrong with this. Hitting a land off of it is another ramp piece, which granted, if you're already at 5 casting this, the turn you play after it, you should be at 6. So you're going to play Etali after it anyway. But again, you want to be able to recast it later. You want to be able to transform Etali if you really want to finish the game. There's just things that you want to do that need mana in green and red. Pretty straightforward. O'Hare Kozlem is a great way to get there while also being a threat, while also getting more creatures out on the board. All in all, a very powerful card and a great inclusion in Etali. Last March of the Ends is just a great card to hit off of Etali. I don't want to pay this full cost if I don't have to, but if I have to, it is what it is. It's a 6, a green and a green for sorcery. This spell can be countered. I love those words. Draw cards equal to the greatest toughness among creatures you control, then put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield, which in a Gruul deck is probably going to be quite a few creatures. That it's off of the greatest toughness among creatures you control is pretty solid because your Etali is a 7/7, so that's 7 cards. If you flip your Etali, that's 11 cards. Now, granted, I want to play this for free off of an Etali hit, so it's typically going to be 7, which drawing 7 cards and then putting any number of creatures up from my hand onto the battlefield is still really, really good. So this is a great inclusion. Also, if you have up the Beanstalk on the board, both of these other cards do trigger up the Beanstalk. Put your Beanstalk into Etali decks. Come on now. So, great cards. Now let's get to number 1. Number 1 is my absolute favorite. I never thought that a mono-colored commander would be my favorite, but I have had so much fun with this. Not my opponents, though. I've had a lot of fun with this. Sorry, opponents. It's Sheoldred. 3, a black and a black for a Phyrexian Praetor. It is a 4/5 with menace. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature or planeswalker. Then for 4 and a black, exile Sheoldred. Then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery and only if an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. This is the backside. This is where things get really, really fun. The True Scriptures. It's a saga. Turn 1 for each opponent. Destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker that player controls. Then number 2, each opponent discards 3 cards, then mills 3 cards. Make sure that those graveyards get filled up. Then at number 3, put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Exile the True Scriptures, then return it to the battlefield. As Shelly. So this is my type of deck. I'm in by heart a Golgari or Orzhov player. Those are my favorite color combinations. But just mono black here can do so much. So it has so much good removal, obviously. How I like to build Sheoldred is to just have a lot of valued creatures and creature removal. There's a lot of ways that you can still build up the board with creatures, fill it up, have creatures of your own, but have a lot of removal alongside it. That's how I like to build my Sheoldred, so it's not too much of a control deck, and I have the real true payoff of filling the graveyard and getting creatures on the board. Which, again, this is another one of those cards that's really good in Brawl in 1 versus 1, but has even more value in a multiplayer setting. The only tricky thing in multiplayer, if you have 4 players, there's a bigger chance that they're going to be able to remove your enchantment whenever you flipped it. So getting to that third phase is not going to happen a lot in Commander, I don't think. But if it happens, it's going to be insane. If it doesn't happen, you still have a lot of really cool effects. So, again, I really love the fact that each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature or planeswalker, so it's going to be something of value that they're going to have to get rid of. And if you time it right and you're going to have a lot of removal running, you're going to be able to kind of pick and choose what that's going to be. And then, again, being able to flip this and potentially get a ton of value through those phases is just really great. And you can just build this deck so well. So some of the cards that I like to include in a Sheoldred deck. So Virtue of Persistence is a great card. First off, it's removal. You want to run a lot of removal. You don't want Sheoldred to be your only removal and potentially make an opponent sacrifice a Lana or Elf. That's not what you want to accomplish. So having the Loctwain Scorn as a sorcery side on the adventure is great for removal, but then at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's a really great enchantment payoff because, again, you're going to be filling graveyards. So if you can start handpicking kind of like creatures that you want to put onto the battlefield under your control from those creatures that you've thrown away, it's going to be really powerful to be able to have Virtue of Persistence on the board. Also, this is going to draw enchantment removal, which makes it safer for your Sheoldred's enchantment to hit the board. Roaming Throne is a 4-mana creature that's a 4/4 with War 2. When it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Its Roaming Throne is the chosen type in addition to its other types. If a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers, it triggers an additional time. Now, granted, Roaming Throne is good in a lot of decks and should probably be in a lot of Commander decks. Any Commander that has a triggered ability, Roaming Throne is probably good. I like it even more in Sheoldred, and I wanted to mention it specifically in Sheoldred because there's a lot of good Phyrexians in black. Phyrexians have a lot of powerful triggered abilities. and I like to put a lot of Phyrexians in my Sheoldred deck. So Roaming Throne is a great addition. And again, Roaming Throne allowing Sheoldred to destroy or make everybody sacrifice 2 non-token creatures or planeswalkers is insane. You're going to be able to get rid of 6 permanents with just your commander hitting the battlefield. That is insane value. So Roaming Throne is, again, an addition in almost every commander deck, but especially in Sheoldred. It is nuts. So, Breach the Multiverse is also great for Sheoldred because you're already going to be throwing stuff into graveyards of your opponents, but then being able to top it off with a Breach the Multiverse and handpick some more stuff is just great. It should be in every black deck, but especially in Sheoldred, like I said with Roaming Throne, it just fits so well. It's 5 and a black for sorcery. Each player mills 10 cards. For each player, choose a creature or planeswalker card in that player's graveyard. Put those onto the battlefield under your control. Then each creature you control becomes a Phyrexian in addition to its other types, triggering Roaming Throne. So if you have Roaming Throne on the board as a Phyrexian, Breach the Multiverse just makes everything go which is awesome. So again, Roaming Throne even better in Sheoldred than any other deck, really. I love Sheoldred. I'm really successful in it as Brawl. I have not built it in paper yet, but I've kind of seen it play out. I've seen it being played in paper, and it's just very, very powerful. And I just can't wait to at one point be able to build this in paper myself. So those were my top 5 commanders for 2023, or that were released in 2023 rather. So here's the overview. Thrun, the fun commander. Jirina hazoret for value Boros. Amalia, just the coolest life game payoff. Etali for just absolute degenerative stuff in really cool colors, and Sheoldred just to absolutely obliterate the board and steal everybody's stuff by taking them out of graveyards. Very, very cool cards. I love this year for commanders. I've played the heck out of Brawl. I've built several commander decks, and I'm really excited to see what 2024 will bring. Because so far, this year was great for commander players. Um, let me know what you guys think. If there's any cards in here that you agree with or have had good success with, or cards that you think should be inclusions that I didn't mention, or different ways that you've built. Some commanders might not be these, might be others. What are some of your favorites from 2023 among the legendary creatures that were released, among the many legendary creatures that were released, and how did you build it? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe. I'm going to try to do more like card review videos in the future, review previews, that kind of stuff. So I really enjoy talking about him. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good 2024.